Sound check 1 2 3. Sound check 1 2 3.
Good morning, everybody. It is September the 19th, 2023. I'm calling the Planning Committee meeting to order. All electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. In chambers today, come on in. We just have a class, I assume, joining us. In chambers today, we have Councillor Beattie, Councillor Cassar, Councillor Clark is joining committee this morning, Councillor Francis, Councillor Wang, Councillor Taddison, myself, and online I see Councillor Pauls, Councillor Alex Wilson, and Councillor Kretsch. So we do have quorum this morning. Clerk Kelsey, are there any changes to today's agenda?
Yes, Chair Danko, there are changes. Under public hearings, we have 10.1, application for zoning bylaw and draft plan of subdivision for lands at 82 Carlson Street. We have added written submissions from Frank Stanisa and Nancy Maletti.
Thank you. Need a mover and a seconder that the agenda be approved as amended. Moved by Councillor Francis, seconded by Councillor Taddison. All in favor or opposed? Thank you. That is approved. And we do have a gallery full of, I think, students. Where are you guys from? City Lab. City Lab. Welcome. You picked a good meeting. This is a short one. Members of the committee, are there any declarations of interest today? Seeing none. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes from September the 5th, 2023 as presented. Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Pauls. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 6, delegation requests. Item 6.1, Bernadette Bowen, respecting the enclosure of twin compactors at Canadian Tire on 777 Upper James Street. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the delegation request for the October 3rd Planning Committee meeting. Moved by Councillor Beattie, second by Councillor Taddison. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none. All in favor or opposed? And I see Councillor Nan. Thank you for joining us. That carries unanimously. Delegations for today. Joshua Bossens, respecting concerns about the McMaster Homecoming event on Dalewood Avenue. Joshua, if you're present. In person. Joshua, are you perhaps online? Can we just check the list of participants? No. Nope. So we're going to call Joshua Bossens for a second time. Joshua, if you're available, please come to the podium. And for a third and final time, a delegation from Joshua Bossens, respecting concerns about the McMaster Homecoming event on Dalewood Avenue. So Joshua is not in attendance in chambers and not logged into the meeting. So we are going to move on. Item 9.1, consent items, is the active official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and plan of subdivision applications. Mover and a seconder to receive this report. Moved by Councillor Taddison, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to public hearings. The public has been advised of how to pre-register to be a delegate at the public meetings on today's agenda. Members of the public, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the City of Hamilton before Council makes a decision regarding the development applications before us today, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the City of Hamilton to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So item 10.1, application for zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision for lands located at 82 Carlson Street in Stony Creek, Ward 9. We do have Councillor Clark in chambers today joining us for Planning Committee. Does committee wish to see the staff presentation? Yes? Okay, thank you. Charlie Tolman. And just for those in attendance today, we have a staff presentation, then we have a presentation by the applicant, any public discussion, anybody from the public that wants to speak, and then we will discuss the report and vote on the final recommendations. Charlie, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Planning Committee, fellow staff and staff or in the public in attendance. My name is Charlie Toman, Program Lead, Policy Planning and Municipal Comprehensive Review in the City of Hamilton's Planning Division. Sorry. That was working.
Just getting the presentation loaded up.
Sorry about that. I could see it on my screen, but on that screen. Today I will be discussing the applications for a draft plan of subdivision application and a zoning bylaw amendment application for the lands located at 82 Carlson Street in Stony Creek. First, looking at the subject lands, they are 1.33 hectares in the size, and they're located both at the eastern edge and the western edge of Carlson Street. My laser pointer. So they're located at the western edge of Carlson Street and the eastern edge of Carlson Street, located just north of Highland Road West, and they are located just south of Maplewood Park. The lands are mainly surrounded by single detached dwellings. The subject lands are designated neighborhoods on the Schedule E1 of the City of Hamilton's urban official plan, and they're located within the West Mountain Heritage Green secondary plan, which designates the land's low-density residential 2B. This designation and the secondary plan allows single-detached, semi-detached, and duplex dwellings at a maximum density of 29 units per net residential hectare. The lands are currently zoned both neighborhood development and D-zone, which allows existing uses, and a modified single residential R422 zone, which permits detached dwellings, both of which are under Stony Creek zoning bylaw number 3692-92. The applicant is proposing to rezone the entire sites to a modified low-density residential R1 under City of Hamilton zoning bylaw number 05200. The applicant is proposing several site-specific modifications to the zone, which are summarized in Appendix C of staff's report. The modifications, which include a reduction in the minimum lot area and reductions to the front, interior, and rear setbacks, are all based on the existing mods in the R422 zone. Staff are also recommending that street townhouses be removed as a permitted use within the site-specific zoning bylaw, as street townhouses are not allowed in the secondary plan for these lands. The applicant is also proposing a draft plan of subdivision to extend Carlson Street, so it makes a complete connection from the east to the west. To the north of the proposed extension, the applicant is proposing 14 lots and 2 development blocks, which would be for single detached dwellings. And to the south of Carlson Street, the applicant is proposing 7 lots for a semi-detached dwelling. So there'd be 14 total units to the south. In order to make this full extension, the road would have to cross this portion of land here, which I'll just outline, which is currently owned by the city. By extending the road across these lands, it would be severing this property, and the proposal is that the lands to the north here, which are currently used as a parking for residents to enter Maplewood Park, that use would be maintained, and that the lands to the south here could be developed for residential purposes. Through the recommended draft plan of subdivision conditions, staff are recommending that the applicant be responsible for 100% of the costs in the construction of the extension of Carlson Street, including all underground services and sidewalk, as well as requiring the applicant to put a service connection to the city-owned lands to the south here. For additional background, staff note that the Stony Creek Valley Park neighborhood plan, shown here from 1989, had envisioned this extension of Carlson Street, shown here. The neighborhood plan does not form part of the Urban Hamilton official plan. However, it does show that the extension of Carlson Street has been planned as a part of the build-out of that neighborhood for some time. Now looking at photos of the subject lands and surrounding areas. First, this is on the west side of this site, looking east towards where the extension of Carlson Street would go through. And again, this is on the west side of the site, looking west at the existing detached homes on Carlson Street. Moving to the east side of the site, this is on the other end of Carlson Street, looking west towards where the proposed road would extend through. This is looking south at those city-owned lands, which I mentioned. And this is looking north at the existing parking area and the pedestrian entrance into Maplewood Park. And this is looking east at the existing homes on Carlson Street. And then finally, this is a photo from inside Maplewood Park, looking southwest, and you can see the approximate boundary of the subject lands where the grass is much higher here. So with this proposal, there would be single detached homes backing on to this area here. As per the Planning Act, the applicant posted notice signs of the application being complete, and which was also updated to notify the public of this meeting. Staff also circulated residents within 120 meters of the property, both again when the application was deemed complete, as well as notice of this meeting. When the staff finalized its recommendation report, the city had received one letter in opposition to the proposal, which is included in Appendix F, and it speaks to concerns about the inclusion of semi-detached dwellings within the subdivision. The applicant also invited residents within 120 meters to attend a virtual public information center on December 12th, 2022. At which one resident did attend, and their questions were focused more on the timing of any potential construction of the lands. The application was also circulated to external review agencies and internal departments for a comment. No objections were received, with staff identifying several special conditions of the draft plan of subdivision related to stormwater management, urban design, tree preservation, the extension of Carlson Street across city-owned lands, all of which are provided in Appendix E to staff's report. In conclusion, the proposal has merit and can be supported as it is consistent with the provincial policy statement. It conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. It complies with the general intent of the Urban Hamilton Official Plan and the West Mountain Area Heritage Green Secondary Plan, and the proposal is compatible with the surrounding existing residential uses and represents good planning by, amongst other things, increasing the supply of housing units through intensification. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Charlie. Not seeing anyone on the speakers list. Councillor Clark?
Sorry, Chair, my e-scribe on my laptop doesn't allow me to say, can I be on the speakers list, please? So my apologies for that. Thank you, Chair, for the presentation. Can I ask that, Charlie, I can't see the page numbers on this. I'm looking at the one that shows the 7 singles and semi-detached, which is 14 semis. That there, perfect, okay. So the ones to the top of the screen, just to get my bearings, that would be the park?
Through the chair, the 14 lots and the 2 blocks would be single detached dwellings, but just beyond that is Maplewood Park here, yes.
Thank you very much. And this proposal, if I heard you correctly, you said that it was compliant with the secondary plan and the zoning?
Through the chair, the proposal does conform with the secondary plan. However, the zoning is zoned both R422 and neighborhood development and ND, and the neighborhood development zone doesn't allow any new uses. So the applicant did have to submit a zoning bylaw amendment to change the zoning of these lands. But while they also did that, they also updated the R4 zone under the old Stony Creek zoning bylaw to bring it into 05200, our new zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Chair. And to be clear, what is being proposed here would be classified as low density?
Through the chair, that is correct.
In the conditions, it indicates that the developer will be responsible for you removing waste until the road is handed over. It didn't address snow clearing. So should we be adding that? The only reason I'm asking is because I've had issues with developments where they're not clearing the snow, the residents think it's the city's responsibility, but we have not assumed the road yet. So we don't do that, and it's on the developer's dime. So can I just get clarification? Will that be the same intent here? And if it is, should we be including it somewhere?
Through the chair, I'd like to direct that question to growth and management staff.
I've had the same issue, so it's a good question.
Ashraf Hanna, Director of Growth Management and Chief Development Engineer. One of the standard requirements for developments is for the developer to make arrangements through growth management with Public Works to clear snow once they meet the requirements. They need to ensure that the road is ready for snow clearance, and once that's done, there's inspection being done, and then the clearance takes place for Public Works to start snow clearing.
To clarify, Chair, where is that stated?
It's part of the construction process. But
I'm not sure I really understand that process.
Staff are just conferring.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Binu Kora, Director of Development Engineering, to the councillor. As part of the concession process, city will actually make sure once the developer actually complete the construction, and once we accept the road, it is the responsibility of the city to clear the snow, and that arrangement will be made between our concession section and Public Works.
Again, to clarify, you indicated once the city accepts the road. We do not accept an unassumed road. We only accept an assumed road once the final coat is down. They are permitting occupancy much sooner than that, usually when there's only one coat of asphalt on the road. So the question still stands. Will we be requiring the developer to clear the snow when we have not assumed the road?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are two processes in the concession process. Number one is, the acceptance and the assumptions. When a developer actually proceed with the construction, city actually has to accept the undergrounds and also the base asphalt and the services. Then only actually they can obtain the building permit. So as part of the concession process, the developer and the Public Works actually make the arrangement to clear the snow. That is our standard process actually, it's following so far.
And I would suggest to our senior leadership team that at some point you may want to review that process because it has been failing. And not just in my ward, I'm hearing from many of my colleagues who are experiencing development pressures that we're getting complaints the snow hasn't been cleared, and it's not the city's responsibility, it's the developer's responsibility, but they're telling the residents, call the city councillor. So we need to fix that somehow on a go-forward basis. I don't want to delay this application today, but we need to make sure that the snow is being cleared because early occupation of these properties is happening. I've had some residents raise concerns about the volume of traffic that will be created by these homes. Can you indicate to me, I read it in one of the pages that they're not going to have garages in all of the units? Did I read that correctly?
Through the chair, we haven't received detailed building elevations for the final buildings. However, the zoning bylaw It's our understanding that each unit would have a garage, and that garage would have to be set back 6 meters from the front property line in order for them to have enough room to park a vehicle. But we at this point we have not received individual building drawings for each of the sites.
So each unit, so semi-detached unit as well as single residential unit, will have a garage, is what you're saying?
Through the chair, that would be at the discretion of the builder and the final home buyer. The zoning bylaw does require a minimum of 1 parking space per dwelling, and understanding the area and that the developer had completed homes on Carlson Street, all of that had garages. That would be my expectation.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Charlie, sincerely. The other item that was pushed back by a petition that was received today was the volume of traffic going up and down the streets. So we're looking at not a huge increase in housing on that street. So I'm struggling to understand the concern about an increase in traffic. So you don't have a map there, but Carlson curves up towards Highland Road and then goes straight across to Second Road, which comes back up to Highland. So there's 2 entrances and exits from this development, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Thank you. And the other things that were added in this complaint was issues about drug dealing and things like that were occurring in the park. We had that corrected by having a gate installed and closing that park in the evenings, and that resolved that issue completely. Those are all my questions, pending any further questions from my colleagues around the table. I do appreciate the latitude of asking the questions today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further speakers on the speakers list. So in that case, I need a mover and a seconder to receive the staff presentation, moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Francis. All in favor or opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Stephanie Murdich with MHBC Planning is in attendance. And Stephanie's just making her way to the podium.
Good morning, members of council, members of the public, and staff. My name is Stephanie Murdich, and I'm a planner with MHBC Planning here on behalf of the landowner this morning for the draft plan and zoning application at 82 Carlson Street. Thank you, Charlie, for the detailed presentation. I will be brief and try to clarify some of the questions and items that have come up this morning throughout my presentation. Overall, the subject lands, as Charlie noted, have 2 points of access, so I just wanted to clarify that, one from the east and one from the west. The proposal includes the extension of Carlson Street as a public road, and I'll have some plans that show that in a moment. The lands are currently vacant and within an established low-rise residential community with a mix of single detached and semi-detached dwellings. So just some background on the application. The pre-consultation meeting was held in November of 2021, and a formal zoning bylaw amendment and subdivision was submitted in September of 2022. We did have a virtual neighborhood meeting where only one member of the public did attend in late 2022, and we received, I believe, one written comment as part of the application as well. We received the feedback from staff and technical agencies, and we prepared a fulsome resubmission, which was submitted in May of 2023. Brief overview of the policy framework. I think, as we mentioned, the official plan does permit both single detached and semi-detached dwellings, as does the West Mountain Secondary Plan. The lands are designated low-density residential 2B, which permits a maximum density of 29 units per hectare. And just for information purposes, we are just around 28.5 units per hectare, so that is within the permitted density range. Overall, the use is appropriate and permitted for the subject lands and reflects what was envisioned originally in the neighborhood plan for the area that was completed back in the 1980s, as well as the current enforced secondary plan and official plan. As Charlie mentioned, the zoning bylaw, the lands are split zoned right now. A portion are zoned R422 and a portion are zoned neighborhood development in the former Stony Creek bylaw. As part of the application, we submitted to rezone the neighborhood development portion to permit singles and semis in accordance with the secondary plan, and also make some minor modifications to the existing R422 zone to bring everything under the new zoning bylaw 05200 in the R1 zone. And the whole site is proposed to be zoned as one zone to permit singles and semis, and as staff mentioned, street townhouses will not be permitted. So briefly, I wanted to share this concept plan. I think it provides a bit more context on the draft plan of subdivision. It shows the full Carlson Street extension and the ultimate design intent here. So eventually, the intent is to have 16 single detached dwellings backing onto Maplewood Park, and a total of 7 or 14 units for semi-detached dwellings on the south side of Carlson Street extension, abutting the existing semi-detached dwellings on Highland Road West. So at full build-out, there will be a total of 30 units. I did also just want to note that a chain link fence is being proposed and requested through a draft plan condition along the north border of the park, as well as the design of a new park entrance on the east side of Carlson Street. So the existing 2 points of access to Maplewood Park will be maintained. And just a point of clarification that all units are proposed to have garages, so a minimum of a one-car garage and a driveway space for 2 parking spaces will be provided for each unit. Staff, urban design staff did also request architectural design guidelines, so those will be prepared and submitted to address draft plan conditions prior to the plan registration and building permit submission. So again, this is the draft plan of subdivision. So just a couple points of clarification on this as well. So the 2 future development blocks shown on the far west side are currently located adjacent to the existing Carlson Street cul-de-sac, which is proposed to be eventually sold and added to those lands, but that will not happen until Carlson Street is constructed. A public road is proposed as well as a sidewalk on the north side, so that will also ensure the consistency of the pedestrian network in the subdivision. And these 2 slides are just some preliminary renderings of what these units may look like. So the first slide shows some examples of semi-detached dwellings. Again, examples with both 1-car garages and 2-car garages. And we'll be working with urban design staff and planning staff through the registration and the design of those architectural control guidelines to determine what is an appropriate design and mix of housing for the area. Just to note that the garages are will be recessed back in accordance with the staff recommended bylaw. And here are some examples of single detached dwellings. List of technical studies submitted is here. I just wanted to highlight this morning the traffic impact study that was completed at the request of staff. As was noted, the amount of traffic proposed is minimal. For example, the AM peak period is looking at a maximum of 16 vehicle trips, and the PM peak period is looking at a maximum of 22 vehicle trips. So our traffic study concluded that there are no concerns for operation or capacity within the existing neighborhood and subdivision. And that was approved by staff, and there were no concerns from the technical review. So in summary, the proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the growth plan, and the Urban Hamilton official plan and the secondary plan as well. So staff recommend approval of the zoning bylaw amendment and subdivision, and we support the staff recommendation and the draft plan conditions and zoning bylaw attached in the staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Stephanie. Looking to the speakers list, Councillor Tattison.
Thanks for your presentation today. I just have one question about the grade level differences between the existing residents to the south and I think what are semi-detached homes to the north of them. Is there a difference between those two levels, or will they be meeting each other at the same level in terms of like water flow and so forth?
Through the chair to the councillor, it's a good question. So as part of the detailed design, it is something that our team has been looking at to ensure that there's no concerns, for example, with flooding, drainage, and things like that. So as part of the detailed design, what will be submitted to staff is a detailed stormwater management plan and report and detailed grading plans, and a geotechnical report as well that will look at all of those items.
Thanks for that answer. So if there is a grading difference of say 2 to 4 feet between those two existing lots, is there any consideration for higher fences to be built on the backs of that to provide privacy for the existing residents?
Thanks for the question. Through the chair to the councillor. So on the first point, I just wanted to clarify, if it's a drainage question, there are also swales proposed at the rear of those lots as well. And in terms of fencing, I believe privacy fencing will be provided at the rear of all units, so that's something we can take a look at.
I'll check that out later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. No further speakers on the speakers list. I'm going to put myself, I have 2 quick questions. But first, I just wanted to make sure that you were in support of the staff report.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wang, if you just take the chair for a minute. First question is if your client had considered a higher density here. Just one part of semi-detached is still a very low density. Street towns would have fit perfectly fine there and been within the R1 zoning. So I'm curious as to why that wasn't the plan moving forward for here.
Through the chair to the councillor, it's a good question. The primary reason would be the secondary plan and the maximum permitted density in the secondary plan, which is 29 units per hectare. I think ultimately when this plan was developed, it took a look at the surrounding context and what was probably originally proposed through the neighborhood plan. So that if we were to increase the density to street townhouses, an official plan amendment and secondary plan amendment would have been required. So the decision was made to proceed with what was originally contemplated for the area and only proceed with the zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is going back to Councillor Clark's concerns about when the city assumes the street and the provision of waste collection and snow clearing. So understanding that that is part of the development process, but my question to you is your understanding from your clients that they will be providing snow clearing and waste collection up until the point where the city assumes the roadway?
Through the chair to the councillor, I think that's a good point. I was taking a look at the draft plan conditions. For example, condition 15 in Appendix E does speak to providing a written plan or procedure to deal with issues related to construction, for example, dust and street cleaning. So I think that's something we could look at with staff as part of that condition to ensure that things like snow and waste collection are addressed. I think that condition captures the intent of making sure that everything is undertaken effectively through the construction process prior to acceptance or assumption of the road.
Okay, thank you. I'll take the chair back if there's no further questions. So I need a mover and a seconder to receive the delegation from the owner's agent. Moved by Councillor Beattie, seconded by Councillor Kassar. All in favor or opposed? Thank you. That carries unanimously. On to any members of the public. There are two written submissions from Frank Stanasia and Nancy Maletti. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this item today at this public meeting? Application for zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivisions for 82 Carlson Street and Stony Creek. Any members of the public? Yes, okay. Please just come down to the podium and we ask you to sign in. And just before you get started, you do have 5 minutes to present to committee. There may be some questions at the end, and I'd like if you could just introduce yourself before you start.
Yeah, well, I was one of the petitioners. My name's Frank Stanisa.
Sorry, is the mic on there? Can we just make sure?
I'm guessing.
Yes, okay. Sorry, Frank.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
So I've listened to all the submissions so far, and our concerns still stand with the traffic more than anything else. So anyway, I wasn't able to print my submission, but so we feel that there will be a dramatic increase in traffic through the Second Road to Second Road West. It will be inevitable because due to the proximity to the Red Hill and shopping, retail to the west. So the traffic, we feel, will flow to the west, so the east entrance will not see the dramatic increase in traffic that the west will. So that was one of our biggest issues, even at this point, and I've been in contact with Councillor Clark regarding the stop sign at Carlson. People are not stopping. Second Road West, so north of Highland, has become people are speeding incredibly. Like the street itself is maybe 200 meters long, if that, and the speeds, I've seen kids playing and cars, no regard to the children playing. So anyway, we feel that that there's been no real talk as regard to the traffic. Okay, so
Okay.
that's all I really got for you.
Okay, and thank you. And you have a petition?
It was submitted
It was
to
submitted,
the clerk,
okay.
yes.
It's in the agenda.
That and there was a petition that was signed by, I believe it was 21 or 22 residents.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
again, the feeling is, it's very strong that it sounds good, according to the presentations, but I do feel that we live there and we see the traffic, and the traffic, even coming off of Carlson as is bad. And it will get even worse with the new development. So what we're asking for is for the planning committee to consider our submission and hopefully accept it.
Okay. Thank you, Frank. Are there any questions? Councillor Clark?
Morning.
Your mic's off.
They didn't want to hear from me. Hi, Frank, how are you?
Morning.
So when we're talking about traffic, is it the speed of the traffic that seems to be the predominant concern?
Well, the speed of the traffic is on Second Road, which is not really part of this meeting, but we feel that as of now, with the limited amount of houses that are on, well, not limited, there's quite a few houses on Carlson as it is, that they're not stopping. They're going right through. And I have camera footage on my, that shows that nobody's stopping as it is. So if you're adding 30 houses to the mix, I think it's going to get even worse.
Can you talk into the mic?
Oh, sorry. Too tall. Do you want me to repeat that?
Just so that
Okay, yeah.
To be clear, we broadcast also to the YouTube channel, so the microphone is really important for everyone to hear.
Perfect. Yep.
What are your thoughts about speed cushions being installed on Carlson to slow people down, and perhaps even one or two on Second Road?
That's been brought up, and that would be a great idea. As far as the Carlson Street issue is, they're not stopping at the stop sign.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think a speed hump will actually help with that.
Yeah, that seems to be a prevalent thing right across the city. I know, at least in the ward, we get complaints everywhere that people are taking the stop signs as optional, and they just keep rolling right on through, and in some cases just shooting through and taking their chances.
Well, I won't even start on Highland and Second Road. That's
I
horrible.
was going to bring it up.
That's another topic.
And just so Frank knows and the rest of the committee, I am working with the Traffic Management Division to look at Highland Road. Now that Highland Road has been rebuilt and paved, the increase in speeding and aggressive driving has been rather significant. We are looking at the next phase of the Highland Road development reconstruction being in 2024. And so we're hoping to have some suggestions coming forward in terms of how we can calm that traffic along Highland Road, because there have been reports of actual races down the road as opposed to just speeding down the road. So
That's correct.
I thank you for your presentation. Don't be surprised if it passes. We can address the traffic issues through traffic calming to the best of our abilities. The challenge that I'm facing is I'm seeing across the board an increased need for intensification, and a lot of the developments in my ward are much higher in density than what is being proposed here. So I was grateful that the developer was supportive of maintaining the original secondary plan. So we all knew the development would be coming eventually. Now we need to manage it to make sure that safety is the highest priority for the community. So I do thank you and the residents for participating in this process.
Oh, that's great. Just one more thing I want to add was we all feel, as a group, the whole survey, we feel that, there was some confusion as to whether they were townhouses or Sammys, but now we're clear that they're Sammys. We still feel they'll be out of character for the neighborhood. I mean, the whole neighborhood has no low density or high density. I mean, or medium, I guess they would be concerned. We feel that the neighborhood should be single residential, that they should not sway from that. Again, that's our position.
I understand. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you. I see no further speakers. Thank you for the presentation, Frank. Sorry, Councillor Tassin, you had a question?
I just wanted to give you a chance to make it clear what your solution to the issue was. I just wanted a little bit more understanding of the cul-de-sac proposition.
Well, yeah, that was just, I don't pretend to be a municipal planner, but one thing we came up with was to do, so that there is a cul-de-sac on the west side of Carlson. And what we proposed was to leave the cul-de-sac as is, build around that cul-de-sac, and then do a second cul-de-sac, like a mirror image, where they would put the single residential, and then the rest they would do the semis, so that Carlson East, the east side, would take some of the traffic hit, because I know that we definitely will get the biggest flow of traffic being that everything is, all the, shopping, highways, everything is to the west.
Thank you.
Through the chair, no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. No further speakers. I think this time, thank you, Frank. Appreciate the presentation. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak to this item for 82 Carlson Street in Stony Creek? Going once. Second time, any other members of the public that wish to speak to this item? And a third and final time for item 10.1, 82 Carlson Street in Stony Creek. Any other members of the public that wish to speak? Yes? Please come to the podium. Thank you, Frank. Thank you. And if you can just introduce yourself, and you have 5 minutes to speak to the proposed development for 82 Carlson Street.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Oyinadera Big Bay. I am an arts and science student at McMaster University, and I'm currently doing a semester in residence with City Lab and with all the students to my left over there. So our course is focused on community engagement. So we're working to engage with different communities in Hamilton, and we've actually done a little bit of work in Stony Creek. My personal project that I'm working on with a number of students is actually based in Stony Creek. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the SCORE program, which is based in the Riverdale community in Stony Creek. I am wondering, essentially, just based on what the presentation was earlier and the numbers for engagement that happened with members of the community, I'm just wondering what other efforts have been done to engage people in this community in terms of knowing what comes next for their neighborhood. I was very grateful to hear from that community member what you shared about the concerns that people in your area are having. But I'm just wondering, especially in terms of what the presentation said earlier about just 1 to 2 people submitting concerns, how the community has really been involved and engaged, and if this is something that people in the area are comfortable with, and if not, what kinds of things can be done to improve comfortability and also improve access. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'll take your question. We're going to receive the delegations, and then I will ask that to staff what consultation has been done and how we've communicated with the communities. Thank you. Are there any questions from committee? Seeing none. Thank you for the delegation. Just make sure we get your information. So going back to members of the public, are there any other members of the public that wish to speak to item 10.1? This is a development application for 82 Carlson Street. Seeing none. Second time, any members of the public that wish to speak to 82 Carlson Street, item 10.1. And a third and final time, any members of the public that wish to speak to item 10.1, 82 Carlson Street. Seeing none. So at this time, I need a mover and a seconder that the public's... Sorry? Okay, yeah, please come forward.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Dicklich, and I'm a resident on Second Road West. I was one of the first 6 homes that were built first along Second Road West. So we're taking the brunt of what's going on Carlson, or what's being proposed. Just in terms of no one responding to the first meeting, as far as all the neighbors that signed the petition, we all don't recall getting anything, so we're not even sure how one person possibly responded. But we felt that there wasn't any communication at that point prior. And even today, some of the neighbors claim that they did not receive the letter that Frank and I received, and we were the ones who initiated communication amongst the neighbors. So we're not quite sure if it was just some of the people on Second Road that received it, or that really, truly none of the people on Carlson received it. But the petition is signed by all current residents, or there may be a few exceptions, but the majority of us living on Second Road West and on Carlson. So just to kind of question why, or give a response why no one responded initially. So, but we are speaking up at this point. So, and we hope that our petition is heard, and we did receive it while we were on vacation, so we didn't really have much time to put input since it was the first time that we received the letter about 2 weeks ago. So.
Thank you. Is Nancy?
Nancy Dicklich, yes.
Nancy, thank you. So I'll take the same question, and then we'll ask staff to give an answer to that. I do think we do have a question. Councillor Beattie?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, Nancy, thank you. What you're, I think, presenting to the committee is that the only notification that you and your neighbors received was 2 weeks ago. Is that?
I'm not sure when it came, but I was on vacation during the summer, but this was the one. We didn't receive the one prior, I guess, whenever that first prior meeting was. I think it was, again, I'm not sure what the date is.
Sure. And no, but your neighbors also had a similar experience that they don't believe that they received any of the proper notification.
Yes, well. And some of them claim they didn't even receive this one, the current one that we received.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Nancy. Okay. Once again, any further members of the public that wish to speak to item 10.1, 82 Carlson Street? Going once. Any members of the public that wish to speak to 82 Carlson Street? Going twice. A third and final time. Any members of the public that wish to speak to item 10.1, 82 Carlson Street? Seeing none. So I need a mover and a seconder that the public submissions regarding this matter were received and considered by the committee and the public meeting be closed. Moved by Councillor Tattison, seconded by Councillor Wang. All in favor or opposed? Yes. I'm going to ask Planner Tolman, and then if you have anything to add, please go ahead. So that is unanimous. So I'm just going to ask Charlie, just on the public consultation outreach that was done, if you can clarify for us, please.
Through the chair, so the earlier comment about what the city does to let people know about development applications. The Planning Act in Ontario is very prescriptive as to what the minimum requirements are, and the Planning Act requires that the city send a mail-out notice to all property owners within 120 meters, and to post large signs on the properties, so anyone sort of walking by knows that there's a development application there, what it's for, and who to contact if they have any questions. City planning staff always work closely with the applicant to find ways to go above and beyond that. Though the city can't force an applicant to go beyond that, we often work with them because it's in everyone's best interest to make sure that the public know that there is an application, what is being proposed, and how to provide feedback. And in this case, the applicant chose to do a public information center, which, it's hard to kind of remember now, but thinking back, this was when there was a COVID spike, so that they did choose at that time to make it virtual. On the notifications of the application, staff did send a letter to all property owners within 120 meters. The letter was dated September 1st. letting residents know how to attend this meeting and provide input. In sending that circulation out, we did get an updated circulation list from MPAC, just given the amount of time, in case some of the properties had changed ownership from when the application was first submitted in 2021. And I would ask Elsie Kelsey if she has anything to add to that.
I was just going to add that the mail-out went to 108 property owners, and 10 addresses were on Second Road West, and there was, I think, 22 on Carlson. The mail-outs are addressed to the property name that we have from the MPAC list or current occupant, so we try and capture it that way.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question on the Public Information Center that was held previously, just so I'm clear, that's a non-statutory public meeting, so that would be at the applicant's choice to host that meeting and to how they contact residents. Am I?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. I do see a couple questions from committee on this topic specifically, so we'll just have a little bit of latitude here. I'll go to Councillor Beattie, followed by Councillor Clark. Councillor Beattie?
Just in the interest of deferring to the ward councillor, I'd let Councillor Clark go first.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Beattie, for yielding the floor to me. I appreciate it. So on the non-statutory meeting that was held, I had requested that pre-consultation meeting, which is something that the province has encouraged all municipalities to do. And I had requested a 120 meter mail out, which my understanding is the developer did. I have concerns that we're relying on the minimum for these notifications. Some areas in my ward where the number of residents is sparse, we have requested a higher radius for participation through a mail-out. But I'm going to encourage this committee to consider whether or not we want to change that notification radial boundary to something higher than 120 meters. Because we are experiencing, in some cases, a very small number of people having an opportunity to speak up on these issues. And the only way you can fix that is by increasing your radial boundary to go beyond the immediate neighbors. So it's something that I would encourage this committee to look at. And I'll leave the rest of my comments to the application after you finish this line of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Beattie?
Thank you. My comments will be very similar to my colleagues. First, I just want to make note of the fact that there appears to be a disconnect when we have record of sending out over 100 notices to the community, yet the lived experience, the reality on the ground is that a number of residents are saying that they have received no such notification. So although our best efforts are being employed, obviously something is not connecting somewhere, and I think that needs to be thought of. I go back a few weeks ago when we were discussing an application to Ward 10 at 1310 South Service Road, where a 120 meter radius actually did not reach a single residence just based on proximity. Similar to my colleague, we have a number of large properties, and the notification at a 120 meter radius is just truly insufficient. And I would also add that the public sign boards that are placed on the properties are compared to, and I've been in other municipalities where they physically do a better job with those signage pieces. They're more legible, they're easier to read. I find ours to be rather dated in their format, and perhaps we could ask staff to look at that. I don't know if there's a formal motion coming. I'll leave it to the bench to probably take some comments back and perhaps come forward with something. But these signs, a sign placed on a cul-de-sac on a secondary road is not going to garner a whole lot of attention, nor will a sign with 2-inch letter printed on a white background on a very busy corridor, it's equally easy to miss. And I think we have to do better in ensuring that we have the proper level of engagement with members of our community as we continue to go down these roads of intensification within our communities.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tattison?
Hi, just raising that issue with the cul-de-sac with staff and wondering if that would affect the number of houses that could be built if a cul-de-sac was considered.
So we're not on the report yet. We're just doing a little bit of a audible here on the issue of consultation. So
Sorry, I missed that audible.
yes. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. I won't comment on the mandatory 120 and the signage, but I would like to ask a question because I am a bit of a geek. I do have a film roll of different planning signage across different municipalities from the West Coast to the East Coast. And I'm wondering if I could ask through you to GM Thorne or his staff, have we as a municipality considered the accessibility of our language in the signage and looked at what other municipalities may do in our effort to be more accessible in our what's planned and what's intended? Thank you.
So through the chair, Jason Thorne, General Manager of Planning and Economic Development. And yes, we have, and I would agree that in terms of on-site signage as well as newspaper ads, our language is, it can be unclear, and there are some other municipal examples out there that use clearer language in terms of what they're posting on site. I would note that updating that signage language was and is on our work plan to update. It was something that we were hoping to get to this year. It's admittedly been pushed off a little bit as we dealt with some other priorities, but I would say yes, particularly for the on-site signage. I'd say particularly in actually in infill situations, there are some good municipal precedents out there in Ontario and elsewhere that provide clearer language, usually with a QR code or some sort of link out if you do want to get the full details, as opposed to trying to post all of the full details onto an on-site signboard. So yes, I'd agree that's an area where we could have clearer language. And like I said, it is an item that's on our work plans that we are trying to get to, balancing some other priorities as well.
Councillor?
Thank you. I really appreciate that feedback. That's great news. And if a supplemental question on that, in rethinking perhaps the language in our on the signage, is it that GM Thorne's intent or opinion that that same pursuit of accessibility would also be included in our literature that maybe the city distributes with respect to any planning? Thank you.
So through the chair, yes, I think I was referring specifically to how we give notice of application. So that the two main ones there would be the newspaper ads and the on-site signage and what language is used there. In terms of when we're moving forward with other planning and policy initiatives, we do try to use as clear language as we can while still being correct in using the appropriate terminology. And that's always a bit of a balance that we're trying to achieve. For example, with the staff report, is we want them to be accessible, but they also need to be defensible if they end up getting appealed before the board, and we have to make sure that the appropriate planning rationale and analysis is provided within the report. So again, a bit of a balance that we're trying to strike.
Thank you, and I appreciate that tension in the need to uphold certain mandatory statutory language that isn't always accessible, but is required to ensure that eventually the decision of this council can be upheld because we have met those tests. Again, I'm just encouraged that the work will be coming forward to review because I think it's important. As we know, we have housing targets to meet. This municipality has far exceeded those targets, but I think the more that we can include people in kind of the democratization of that language and in the process, it's just good for local government. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And just a reminder for committee that This is not technically an item for debate or discussion, but as it has come up, we've asked the question. I've opened the floor, but we are following all the statutory requirements of the Planning Act. Councillor Kretsch?
Thanks, and my question was about that, just briefly, in response to some of the concerns that were raised. And frankly, they get raised a lot in Ward 2 because of the weird design of some of the neighborhoods in terms of there being like large institutional spaces that separate, you know, nearby neighbors from 120-meter distance. As part of the review that staff's doing, is the potential to include an augment of that? I know it costs more money, obviously, to send mail out farther as a simple principle, right? Like if you have a 120-meter radius and you make it bigger, it's going to cost us more to advertise. I know that the Planning Act minimum is 120 meters. Is that being explored in any way by the Planning Department in terms of how we can work together, councillors' offices, you know, to get the message out farther, or just wanted to ask staff if there are plans to be discussed, and if not, I can work with my colleagues on a motion about that later at a different time.
Good morning, Anita Fayback, Director of Development Planning. Through the chair to the councillor. Yes, councillor, that is something we're looking at in conjunction with the signposting wording, just to provide, as we talked about, a little bit more plain language, and also looking at that sort of specific circumstance you mentioned where there's large properties, or perhaps there's a highway that bisects, you know, part of that circulation, to make sure that those that are sort of immediately adjacent to that area would be consulted. Now, what we're looking at is what would that specific distance be, and that's something we'd have to take a look at. And as Mr. Thorne indicated, you know, we are looking at our signage, and we've also looked at our initial circulation to the community, which is what we call our notice of complete application, and have made some changes to that notice to simplify language, include visuals as well, to make it a little bit clearer in terms of what that, you know, the planning process might be and what the application is. And we're looking at carrying that forward into the signage and our overall consultation.
Not on the agenda. So we are going to move on to the report. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the report recommendations. Moved by Councillor Beattie, seconded by Councillor Tattison. So discussion on the report. I'll go to Councillor Clark as the ward councillor, if that is okay with committee. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the latitude, and thank you to my council colleagues on this committee. I know I'm just an observer, but I'm speaking to a matter that's in my ward. With reference to public notice, I think we should be cognizant of the fact that we have now lost our local weekly newspapers, which predominantly we advertised in for planning matters. So just bear that in mind as we go forward. The Spectator's insanely expensive, and we have now lost the only other avenue available to us to advertise on a planning matter. Specific to this matter, it's been raised in two ways, actually. It's been raised by the local residents that this change is a change from single-family homes to semi-detached, and that's a higher density than they're comfortable with. And I've heard from the chair specifically mentioning that why didn't they consider a higher density application? I should indicate that in my ward, I have at best estimates at the present time 7 apartment buildings coming. The vast majority of them are on Rymal, are on Stone Church, and an offshoot road of Upper Mount Albion. There's 2 proposals. One's been approved and one that is coming. I supported those applications because they made sense. I have another application which does not make sense, and we'll deal with that when it comes before the committee. But on this one here, it is in keeping with the secondary plan. I know it's not what the residents are wanting me to say, but it is consistent with the secondary plan. And my fear is that if I encourage my colleagues to vote against this, that when it gets to the OLT, there is no guarantee that the proposed plan would stay the same. We've now seen it in Councillor Beatty's area where we objected to these higher density projects, and when it went to the OLT, it went even higher. 6 or 7 more stories were added against the wishes of the city and against the wishes of the residents. So I know it's not providing solace to residents, but having single-family homes and semi-detached homes is a breath of fresh air in an environment in Ontario where we're looking at putting high density on virtually every property. And it's not just the city that's being forced to do this, it's Mr. Ford and his compatriots who are encouraging that. I would like to ask the staff specifically about speed cushions. Do we ever look at traffic calming prior to occupancy on a road, or do we wait until the traffic normalizes, in which point we would look at any traffic calming?
Through the chair, Brian Hollingworth, Director of Transportation Planning and Parking. We do for some of the larger developments, and there's been many examples where we've anticipated that there might be an increase in traffic that has issues, and we've requested as part of a condition things like speed humps or traffic calming, or in some cases just money for traffic calming so that staff can implement an appropriate measure once things are observed and stabilized. In this case, the volumes were relatively low, and staff didn't anticipate that we would need traffic calming, but that doesn't mean that we can't monitor it going forward and implement things as necessary.
So when we're supplemental, when we're looking at the traffic calming on Highland Road, and I understand that's a much larger, lengthy project than this one, would we be able to look at the side streets also at that time? Because we have seen a situation in my ward where we put speed cushions here and then all the traffic, it's like water finds the easiest route, it all moves to another street and it creates a problem elsewhere.
Through the chair, I can commit to connecting with our colleagues in Public Works who looked after those road safety and traffic calming studies and make them aware of this application, the concerns we heard today, and those unintended consequences that you referenced.
And the other unintended consequence would be on Second Road. Now it's a small section of Second Road where we are seeing persistent folks literally turning off a Highland Road, gunning it down to the entrance of the park, and then speeding into the park. Can we also have a traffic management plan, perhaps put some traffic counters there to see how extensive the problem is and how we could solve that problem? To Brian, please.
Yes, through the chair. Again, I'll take that back to our colleagues in road safety.
Thank you for that. So, Mr. Chairman, when this comes to council, I will be supporting the application. I know that the residents are concerned about the change. I know that they're concerned about the increase in semi-detached homes. But as I've indicated, that is at the low end of density. It could have been stacked towns in this area, and I have other areas in my ward where they're actually debating stacked townhouses rather than semi-detached. So I think it's a reasonable, pragmatic application that respects the secondary plan. And I have been pushing that across my ward since I was reelected to council. We go through this long, drawn-out process to develop a secondary plan with all the residents in the area. We develop it, we approve that secondary plan, and then we have developers come in thinking that they know better than the local residents and they know better than the council, and they demand as many units as they can get because they're selling them at $1 million a pop. And this case here, they didn't do that. And so I respect the developer for maintaining that secondary plan, and I encourage my colleagues to support the application also. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Francis, and then I believe Councillor Tattison also had a question, if that's still standing. Councillor Francis?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just a comment from me, and want to thank my councillor colleague to the left of me here, who was not on Planning Committee, but articulated that perfectly. Took a lot of the same words out of my mouth. I've heard from the residents here today, and I agree with a lot of their concerns. There's a lot of challenges when you're adding a development in the middle of an existing community. These residents are upset with the low density proposal and the traffic challenges that it will create, and rightfully so. I share these same concerns along with many more that were articulated. Work will need to be done to mitigate these challenges. I am pleased, however, to see the developer choosing to go forward with a low density development that is in line with the existing low density neighborhood and not pushing forward with some high density monstrosity or apartment building dropped in the middle of a single family detached neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tattison.
Just in regards to my earlier question about a cul-de-sac and if it was preventing any of those housing units from being built, and I'm well, and also again in this car-centric world that we live in, everyone's trying to get somewhere as fast as they can. Just like Councillor Clark said, they seem to take the path of least resistance. So everyone in these neighborhoods is concerned about through traffic. So I just also wanted to give on the end of that question about the cul-de-sac and it affecting housing. Is there any way, I guess what I'm trying to say is are there advantages and disadvantages to having a cul-de-sac? And I want to give staff a chance to discuss that in front of the delegates that are here today.
Through the chair, to add a cul-de-sac, so you extend Carlson Street from both directions, but they both end in the two cul-de-sacs. The major disadvantage is that a cul-de-sac has to be a minimum size in order to accommodate, a fire truck going around. So they can be 20+ meters wide, and those two cul-de-sacs combined would substantially reduce the amount of developable area that could be used for homes in line with the secondary plan. It also increases the amount of infrastructure that the city would have to assume and maintain in the future, as well as increase the amount of paved surface in the area. As stated in staff's reports, the applicant has submitted a traffic impact study, which the staff have reviewed, and staff's opinion is that cul-de-sacs aren't warranted for this proposal.
Thank you very much for those answers. No more questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, just want to echo the comments of my Ward 5 and Ward 9 colleagues that I think this proposal meets the balance that many of us are asking for, in that infill respect the existing community to the best of our ability, recognizing that we have shared goals of increasing unit count, increasing density across our municipality. But whether it's an empty field or a former school site or a former banquet hall, some of these proposals that come forward in our wards don't meet that test and are not in keeping with the local character. I do think that this, although I recognize the comments from the community on it, I think that this is a win for all. And I'm looking forward to more proposals such as this coming forward that take the character of the existing community into account.
Thank you, Councillor. No further speakers on the speakers list. It was moved by Councillor Beattie, who was the seconder. Councillor Tattison. Thank you. So this is on the report, and to approve the report recommendations. All in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. On to item 11.1, or discussion items. This is school zone special enforcement area pilot. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the recommendations. Moved by Councillor Tattison, seconded by Councillor Kassar. Is there any discussion on the school area enforcement? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to express my deep gratitude for staff in initiating this and partnering with the school board. If I could just ask for a quick overview in advance of my query. Thank you.
Through the chair, James Buffett, Manager of Parking Enforcement and School Safety. This pilot took 4 different school sites, one in Ward 1 and other ones in the Binbrook community area, and we implemented a $250 parking penalty increased amount, which has been very successful around our waterfall sites in reducing parking congestion and poor parking behaviors. And we saw an approximate 50% reduction in parking violations occurring at these sites. And although we don't recommend just a blanket now changing every single school site to a $250 penalty area, we are recommending working on a framework with our colleagues in transportation planning, traffic within PW, and our parking operations team to create a framework of how we can implement and apply the same type of special enforcement area at other school sites.
Councillor?
Thank you very much. Mr. Buffett noted that one of the pilots was in Ward 1, more specifically Earl Kitchener. I guess my opinion is whether you're in a new area or an old area, you're kind of dealing with some challenges. In established neighborhoods, you're dealing with perhaps a road network that is, the good news, narrow, single lane. However, the bad news is that unfortunately some people, rather than taking advantage of walking to school, but perhaps because they do feel their safety is at risk, are driving. And within those established neighborhoods, there's only so much room, and it does present an enhanced safety impediment for our most vulnerable residents and our greatest responsibility, and that is children. So if I could ask, so just also to reiterate staff's report, it was very successful. In developing the framework moving forward, could you just advise on, I know that work is outstanding, but will the existing pilots, will they cease being pilots, or will that penalty system still be at play? Through the chair.
Through the chair, the special enforcement areas at those 4 school sites are still in effect, and they're still being enforced as such.
That's awesome sauce. And moving forward, you'll be continuing to work with the school boards in the identification ultimately of those schools to inform the framework? That's my question. Thank you.
Through the chair, it would be an ideal scenario to use all stakeholders to develop the framework, whether it's quantitative or qualitative when it comes to that time.
So thank you again. This is a really good news story. I can attest to my colleagues that it was very successful. I'm immensely appreciative of the work of staff in initiating this and in working in partnership with the community. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Councillor. On the speakers list, I have Councillor Kretsch, followed by Councillor Tattison. Councillor Kretsch.
Thanks very much. Just wanted to echo what Councillor Maureen Wilson said, primarily just that I really appreciate this project. I know that a lot of these concerns come up in and around Ward 2 schools, not just related to parking, but related to traffic safety in general. And I'm glad to see the trend is going downwards in terms of addressing some of these parking issues or actually creating safer experiences for students who have to walk to school. I think specifically about Dr. Davies School, where it's treacherous to walk, about how some of these improvements will help. So look forward to expansion of this project, because I think these challenges are really abundant in the lower city as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of them. So thank you for this work.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tattison.
I'd just like to say thanks to James as well. But This was a very successful program in Pembroke, and I'd just like to share that as well. There were some initial concerns and misinterpretations of the signage, and James and I spoke about that significantly. For our area, the signage wouldn't need to be changed now because everybody understands it after extensive, mail-outs and so forth and e-blasts. However, going forward, have there been any changes to that signage that will go to the new areas?
Through the chair, that is something that we can look at as part of the framework and any amendments we make to this program. Of any new sites we do decide we can make changes to the signs, which then we could also echo at the existing sites.
Thanks again so much, and no more questions through the chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wang.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, just so that I understand the recommendation is on evaluating future requests. What is the difference between that and alternative 2, which was looking at all City of Hamilton schools? And is that, how resource intensive to look at all City of Hamilton schools versus just the requests for special enforcement areas? Through you, Chair.
Sorry, through the chair, just for a clarifying question. Could you actually repeat that question for me?
So I see in the recommendation that it says that it's that we're directing transportation planning to create a framework for evaluating future requests for special enforcement areas. But then down at the very bottom for alternatives for consideration, it actually says that all City of Hamilton schools could be reviewed for the possible implementation of special enforcement areas. Just wanted to understand what is the difference between the two and what is the resources required if B were to be adopted. Alternative B.
So through the chair, the recommendation is to create a framework so we can apply it to any new potential requests that are coming in. The alternative is simply applying it to all schools, which may not be necessarily suitable because some of these schools may not have necessary requirements to implement a $250 fine, which is imposing on the nearby residents that it might when it is implemented. So as opposed to a blanket approach of just creating every single school a special enforcement area, creating a framework to apply it when it's necessary.
Through you, Chair, what are the resources required for creating the framework then?
Through the chair, we'd be working in collaboration with the board, so all the stakeholders that we utilized to come up with this pilot project, working with subject matter experts in our transportation planning team, our parking operations team, as well as traffic within PW, to create either a checklist using quantitative and qualitative measures to see whether or not what is the best approach to implement an increased fine structure, whether that be on collision history data, whether that be on parking fines being issued in the area, parking complaints. So it's to develop those using those stakeholders.
Through you, Chair, will there be additional FTEs added to this, or are we using the existing FTEs that we currently have within the parking division?
There is no ask, or would there be a future ask to simply implement the framework? Then there's no need an additional FTE asked to enforce them. We'd be utilizing our existing parking control officers already.
Thank you. Chair, it sounds as though it seems like a pretty slam dunk, easy win. So I feel like this is something that I would love to support. And ideally, I'd love to see more of these special enforcement areas in Ward 4. Thank you very much.
Certainly the time of year when this is top of mind. Thank you. If we have no further discussions, the report and recommendations were moved by Councillor Tassin and is seconded by Councillor Cassar. No further discussion. All in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. Item 11.2, draft major transit areas. There is a presentation if committee wishes to see the staff presentation. Yes? Okay. So we have Charlie Tolman and Dylan Consulting.
I don't know why it's not. Thank you. Are you sharing it on the screen?
Did it take me to the end?
For those of you on the WebEx, we're just getting the presentation loaded.
That's the wrong one. Thank you. Sorry about that. Good morning, members of Planning Committee, fellow staff, and public in attendance. My name is Charlie Toman, Program Lead, Policy Planning and Municipal Comprehensive Review in the City's Planning Division. I am going to be providing a very brief presentation on the staff's report on draft major transit station areas before I turn it over to Patty Kennedy and Annie Boo Ellis from Dylan Consulting. Thank you.
Don't have to speak as close
Okay.
to the old one.
Okay. From Dylan Consulting, who will be presenting the findings from their work. The city needs to plan for in the intensification of people and jobs around higher order transit in order to conform with the policies of the growth plan. The work undertaken for major transit station areas, or MTSAs, is concentrated on around the 17 proposed LRT stations, as well as Hamilton's 3 GO rail stations. The work is to ensure that the city's land use policy framework in these areas allow development that would achieve the minimum number of people and jobs per hectare required under the growth plan. The MTSA planning work is a component of the growth-related integrated development strategy update, or GRIDS 2, and the city's municipal comprehensive review work plan. This means that the MTSA work, including any required official plan amendments, would have to be sent to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing for approval. The city had originally initiated this work back in 2018, and while it was underway in 2019, with the announcement from the province that they were attracting funding for the LRT, created uncertainty. So staff put this project on hold to focus on other growth-related matters. When the work on the LRT project was reinitiated in 2021, the MTSA policy context had changed through the release of the 2019 growth plan. So there was a need for staff in reinitiating this work to revisit the overall policy framework. Back in 2019 as well, the MTSA work was decoupled from the city's urban growth conformity exercise to 2051, which resulted in official plan amendment 1167. However, staff did include basic policies and mapping for MTSAs in OPA 167, in including the recognition of MTSAs as a strategic growth area and the urban structure policies, and the identification of the LRT stations to be reviewed. Now, through this current exercise, staff have been working through identifying the boundaries of the MTSAs and identifying any additional policies that are required to the Urban Hamilton official plan in order to conform to the growth plan. It is important to note that through the growth conformity through OPA 167, the city made several changes to the city's official plan policies to increase densities allowed within transit corridors, and that these updated policies are also captured in the work that Dylan has completed and will be sharing today. The city retained Dylan back in 2022, and Dylan had previously done work on the MTSAs to work on the delineation of the MTSA boundaries and the modeling exercise to determine the densities that can be achieved. The city and Dylan Consulting plan on consultation later this fall on the draft MTSA report. Through this consultation, we have several objectives, including to inform the public about the importance about planning growth around transit, providing additional background about the evolution of this project and its broader relationship with the city's overall city building goals, including intensification, to receive feedback on the draft delineations for the major transit station areas and the potential build-out densities, and to explain and receive feedback on the opportunity to identify some or all of the major transit station areas as protected major transit station areas and those relationships with inclusionary zoning, and also just to gather additional comments from the public on any other opportunities or issues that the city should be looking at when planning growth around transit. Staff's consultation plan would include 2 in-person open houses, 1 virtual event, and additional engagement tools available through the city's Engage Hamilton platform. To get the word out, staff would be sending notices in the local newspapers, posting on social media, sending updates to the GRID's mailing list, which has, I don't know the exact number, but many residents on it. Staff will also be reaching out directly to the BIAs and the community associations within the station areas, as well as the Home Builders Association, nonprofit housing providers, and others. The report today recommends that the major transit station area draft report prepared by Dylan and attached as Appendix B to staff's report be received by council, and that council authorize the staff to commence public and stakeholder consultation on the draft report, and that staff report back on the results of the consultation and any changes to the report at the time the major transit station area final report is presented for approval. That concludes my portion of the presentation, and I'll now turn it over to Patty and Annie to speak to what they found.
So Annie, if you're, we see your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Charlie, and good day, Chair, members of Council and Planning Committee, and members of the public. I hope I'm coming through loud and clear. Please let me know if I'm not.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. My name is Annie Bullis, and I am a planner with Dillon Consulting. Joining me is Patty Kennedy, a planner and partner at Dillon. And we are very excited to be here today to provide a brief overview of the draft MTSA report, including the context, purpose, and approach to the study and our preliminary results and recommendations. For context, transit-oriented development is an approach that locates growth within walking distance of rapid transit stations, such as the city's planned LRT and GO train stations. It includes planning for increased densities around the station areas, which contributes in turn to walkability and a mix of uses, including access to housing, jobs, and amenities, and to assist municipalities such as Hamilton to plan for intensification. The province's growth plan sets out minimum density targets of 160 people and jobs per hectare for LRT stations and 150 people and jobs per hectare for GO stations. And through planning exercises such as this one, a municipality must demonstrate how they will achieve these minimum density targets. In addition, the Planning Act also provides an opportunity to identify MTSAs as protected major transit station areas, also referred to as PMTSAs, and we will provide some further information on this in a few slides. So the purpose of the MTSA study is to outline the boundaries for the city's MTSA in the context of the LRT and GO stations, identify whether or not the city can meet the provincial minimum density targets for each of the MTSAs, identify the need for alternative targets for MTSAs that don't meet the minimum density target, recommend which MTSAs to identify as protected major transit stations, and to provide a potential approach to implement recommendations within the Urban Hamilton official plan on MTSAs. So what are MTSAs? The province's growth plan defines an MTSA as the area generally within a 500 to 800 meter radius of a transit station, and that represents about a 10-minute walk. Protected major transit station areas are a subset of MTSAs, and under the Planning Act, a municipality is able to identify an MTSA as a PMTSA subject to provincial approval. And the benefits of a PMTSA is that the municipality is able to implement inclusionary zoning regulations. But in addition, it also provides increased certainty over the permitted uses, heights, and densities for the area, since policies and regulations cannot easily be changed for a PMTSA. So a key part of designating an MTSA as a PMTSA is very similar to what we just covered for the MTSAs, and it includes identifying the boundaries of the PMTSA in the official plan, including an overview of people and jobs per hectare, permitted uses, and the minimum densities. So the draft MTSA report is an important step in also identifying potential PMTSAs for the city. So as part of this planning exercise, we are looking at 19 MTSAs along the city's planned LRT line. from McMaster University to Eastgate, and that includes 17 LRT stations and 3 GO train stations, with the James LRT station and the downtown GO station sharing an MTSA due to their proximity. Hence, we have 20 stations, but 19 MTSAs. So the image on the slide shows the 800-meter radius for each station area, as well as the minimum density targets that applies for LRT and GO stations. And I am now going to turn it over to Patty to present the approach and preliminary results and recommendations.
Thank you, Annie. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of council, and anyone watching at home. I'm going to try to provide a brief overview of our methodology for the work we did and some highlights of the key findings. I'll spend a little bit of time talking, I think, more about how the boundaries of the MTSAs were delineated and a little bit about some of the nuances and details of that. But as Annie mentioned, sort of the main question we're trying to resolve through this work is to understand whether the city's current planning framework enables the city to meet those minimum density targets. And so to do that, the first step is to delineate the boundaries of each major transit station area. And in doing so, we do have to understand within the MTSA what parts of that area can be subject to sort of more significant forms of intensification relative to others within that MTSA. That helps us understand the types of growth that is planned to occur within that area that allows us to then take all that information, put it into our 3D modeling software, which is essentially a digital twin model of the city, begin to sort of understand how much growth is possibly within each of these MTSAs. We also, in step 4, take into account not only the sort of traditional forms of transit-oriented development, but also opportunities for smaller scale intensification within these MTSAs. Those would be things around accessory dwelling units, tiny homes, these types of things that provide diversity in the housing supply. We can then take all that development and translate it into a series of population and employment yields that we can then calculate a resulting density from. And so there's quite a bit of detail in our report on the methodology, so I'll stay sort of at a high level for now. And want to go to the next slide, Annie. And we'll talk a little bit about just some high-level assumptions around the approaches. The methodology we use is generally consistent with what we've done in other municipalities, and we've seen across the Greater Golden Horseshoe. A lot of municipalities with higher order transit to go through the same exercise. We generally are dealing with that 800-meter distance and trying to maximize opportunities for intensification, so sort of maximize opportunities for delineation around that 800-meter radius. Taking the radius and turning it into something that is a boundary requires us to put a hard edge on the line work. So we generally are including whole blocks. We're including all the land uses in that general area, whether even there are going to be some uses that are not necessarily going to accommodate intensification. They're an important part of building a complete community. So that's why we have parks and institutional uses in addition to mixed uses in residential neighborhoods, commercial uses in each of the MTSAs. We use sort of those edge conditions, whether they're roads, railway corridors, highways, to sort of form the edge of the boundaries in most cases. And as I'm about to talk about the intent, we do identify a sub area where most of the transit-oriented development is going, and that's the area that we end up modeling in detail in our 3D model. Go to the next slide. We'll take a little bit of a look at what this looks like in real terms. So our work identifies 2 kind of geographies as inputs into the estimating development yields. The first one is that larger blue line. That's your major transit station area boundary. It's generally 800 meters, and as I explained in the methodology, it follows sort of those edge conditions around where blocks are located, streets are located, and that sort of thing. To do our work, we also had to understand where, as I said, the opportunities for intensification exist in the city's current planning framework. So we identify a second sub-area. This area is more just for our work. It doesn't necessarily have implications as a boundary the same way an MTSA does. These areas are generally, though, your transit-oriented zones, in your zoning bylaw. They are areas of mixed-use development and secondary plans. They are geographies that are established in your planning frameworks elsewhere. So that's what you'll see in some of the figures and diagrams, these two different geographies. Go to the next slide. You will see that generally in most cases, we did follow the 800-meter distance. In some cases, we do go beyond 800 meters. In this example here for Ottawa, you'll see the Barton Street corridor to the north end of the MTSA, and we expanded it to closer to 1,000 meters to capture the Center Street mall area, which is an important node in the city's urban structure plan and plan for intensification. So we take a liberal interpretation of the term generally, and that's how we've applied it in a few cases where we can capture some additional TOD opportunities in proximity to the station. As I mentioned, 3D modeling used to confirm build-out potential. Majority intensification along the LRT corridor is around the TOC zones. We did discuss with staff frequently about delineation and any other opportunities for intensification. We consider development applications as well as signs of where intensification would be potential. And we also had to take into account restrictions on development. So the work does include heritage designations and listed buildings and make some assumptions around that. We do take into account the city's urban design guidelines as much as one can in a 3D model that covers 14 kilometers, 2,500 hectares. We do take into account tower separation distances and these sort of things around urban design. And a number of the other technical assumptions are tied to your MCR work and your DC bylaw for things around PPUs and that sort of thing. So what does it all look like? The report has a whole bunch of profiles for the 19 MTSAs that look like this. We have the existing conditions, which estimate your current people and jobs per hectare density. I'm looking at James Street. The James MTSA here. You'll see the current density meets greatly exceeds, in fact, the minimum density target of 160 people and jobs per hectare here at 306. The build out, when you build out the aspects of the downtown Hamilton secondary plan, the current zoning, the potential to greatly exceed the target in this case. And that's what the model is intended to show. Go to the next slide. Some of the big conclusions thus far are that 14 of the 19 major transit station areas have planning frameworks in place that conceivably allow the city to meet the minimum density target or exceed it. And there are 5 that could require an alternative target. Go to the next slide here. So this is just a visual representation of where those alternative targets may be required. They're highlighted in red. The provincial framework does allow municipalities to seek out an alternative target, and the staff report speaks to that framework as well. And for now, we're considering them preliminary because as we go through the engagement process, we may uncover other opportunities to meet the target. But for now, it's Longwood, Sherwin, Gage Park, Queenston, and Parkdale. I'm not going to go through this slide in detail. It's here more for a matter of record. It's a summary of all the final intensities projected at a build-out horizon for each of the MTSAs. Maybe some high-level points here. We're talking about a significant amount of long-term development opportunity and growth for the city. It is an area along the corridor that's about 2,500 hectares. It is the potential at build-out of over 500,000 people and jobs in this location, across these areas. So significant amount of future growth potential in the area. We go to the next slide. We can skip this one since I've covered this already. It's just the alternatives. Just a bit of a rationale on as a snapshot of why a station might need an alternative target. If we look at the Gage Park MTSA for an example, there's a couple of things that jump out. Over half the MTSA is the park, so that is not going to accommodate any development potential in the future. Now, the configuration of the station area also makes it a little bit challenging to plan for more intensification. However, that is, again, the type of information we can bring to the public and work through and get feedback and see if there's other changes to the boundaries or changes to our assumptions we need to make. So the preliminary recommendations at this point are a couple of things. I guess the first one to highlight is that for now, we suggest that consider all the major transit station areas as PMTSAs under the Planning Act for two reasons. I think until the IZ work proceeds to far enough along to suggest there's only some specific geographies where it's applicable. For now, we want to keep all the options on the table in terms of opportunities to implement IZ. The second one is that the Planning Act framework does allow for quite a bit of greater certainty over future land use by restricting appeal rights in MTSAs once they're designated as protected and they have all those elements in your official plan and zoning that Annie was highlighting earlier. So I think that for those reasons, it's prudent to consider all of them at this stage. So the next steps are to update the official plan after public engagement would be to prepare an OPA and update the official plan to implement the boundaries and any supporting policies around the framework. Charlie did highlight next steps, and I will just briefly mention our next steps are essentially to complete the public engagement program. I would make a footnote in 2019, the earlier work that was done on the 500-meter major transit station area radius, we did go through a public engagement process on that as well. So we already have had quite a bit of feedback, although it is several years ago. So we're looking forward to getting back out to the public realm and having those conversations around maps, as well as the online modules that we'll be building to get feedback on details of the model and the boundaries of things. And then we'd be in a position to finalize a report and bring a report to the planning committee. Concludes my presentation, and thank you for your patience, and I'll turn it back to the chair for any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So I think I'll just ask if you can take the presentation down so I can see everyone, and then I'm going to go to our speakers list. On the speakers list, Councillor Wang.
Thank you. Thank you to both Charlie and to the Dillon consultants for this presentation. Chair, I have a couple of questions. I think the first one is around consultation. We just had a very lengthy conversation about consultation. I do see that you have 2 public meetings coming online. What is the frequency of those meetings? Like, when do you plan on having them? And do you envision that you may need to have more public meetings? Because each of the segment stops for the city, for our LRT, are actually very different demographics. So I'm questioning whether 2 public engagements is enough and whether they're going to hit the maximum number of stakeholders. Through you, Chair.
Start with Charlie, and if you need to go anybody else, go ahead.
Through the chair, the proposed timing of the 2 open houses, in-person open house, they're about a week apart, and staff are looking at 2 different locations, one in the downtown and one in East Hamilton and the main in the Kenilworth area. I believe we may have the venue picked up. I can't recall. I actually brought up the wrong notes, so so I can't recall. But you know, based on the interest from those meetings, and we would ensure that everyone that we invite and we want input from, so the entire community, but in particular those business owners, you know, through the BIAs, that they have advance notice and they can attend those meetings. If there is a significant turnout, which leads to, you know, additional questions being raised, staff would certainly look at holding additional engagements prior to finalizing its recommendations to council. So those questions aren't sort of out there on the floor of a council or a planning committee.
Chair, last night I held a town hall and I had approximately 60 people attend my LRT only. Sorry, it wasn't LRT, it was half LRT. And there was a significant amount of interest. So it's something that I am recommending to staff that we definitely look at absolutely an East End one, because I think that there's a lot of opportunity to speak with residents there. Changing tax, Chair, I'm questioning how did we do the trend and analysis for future growth in all of these potentially all PMTSA locations? Did we take into account HSR routes and truck routes and also future developments that are going to be happening within all of these areas? Through you, Chair.
Through the chair, I'll start, and I may turn it over to Patty and Annie. But with the modeling that was done, it's important to keep in mind that they're based on the existing policy framework that we have in place. So the existing official plan policies, as well as the secondary plan policies in zoning that kind of projects that very large build out. It's not a part of this work to undertake, like a market analysis to determine whether that full build out is achievable at this time, and if not this time, when. But we are looking at all of the information that we have available that we know about those lands and completing the modeling. And if Patty, if Annie have anything to add, feel free.
Yeah, I would just add that the specific, like, there's a very specific question we have to answer from the province is, does the city's planning framework allow the city to achieve the minimums? And that's kind of started out as a test, and then we can layer in other additional questions into future work.
So Patty, can I ask you to pull that microphone in a little bit closer? Just thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those answers. Through you, Chair, my concern is that of the 5, 2 are in the East End, specifically in my ward, but I know for a fact that we are growing significantly within those 2 MTSAs. Queenston, for example, yes, it does have Montgomery Park right adjacent to it, but Parkdale is meant to be a massive transit hub for HSR. And also right across the way is the Roxborough development, where we're looking at almost like 2,000 units coming through. So I think that we're missing a significant piece in terms of that market evaluation, because there is significant growth within those particular MTSAs. So I hope that beyond this study that we are taking of the current planning policy framework, that we are looking at market analysis as well, because it is a significant piece that should be included in how we plan for potentially PMTSAs in the future. So I suppose, Chair, my question is, when are we doing this market analysis, and how is that being incorporated into the existing study that is in front of us today?
Through the chair, with the MTSA work that we need to submit to the province, there is no requirement to do that market analysis. However, I may turn it over to Chief Planner Burbishow, but there is other planning work being undertaken within those different areas under secondary plans or other city initiatives that would look at that when planning for things like infrastructure and future population.
Steve Robichaud, Director of Planning and Chief Planner. Further to Mr. Toman's comments, yes, as part of, first of all, the inclusionary zoning work, we are looking at the market and the ability of the market to absorb what will be the market implications of an inclusionary zoning framework and the economic viability for each of these locations, as well as we have some other work that Watson has been doing for us as it relates to growth forecasts and the need for different types of housing in the city to help inform some of our discussions around rental housing as well as bedrooms, how many small units versus larger units do we need. So we are trying to capture that full demographic needs in the city on a go-forward basis. And then, sorry, excuse me, on the comments about consultation, I mean, what we indicate is we had 2, targeted events specifically planned for this, but because we have other initiatives as well, the intent is try to have it as a one-stop event so that if people are coming out and we're talking about changes to the zoning bylaw or changes to any other of the policy frameworks we're working on, family-friendly housing or inclusionary zoning, that this information will also be made available to the public, whether it's in Mount Hope or whether it's down in your ward, councillor, or any of the wards within the city. And we will also be looking, probably reaching out to each of all the affected councillors for opportunities to take advantage of your town hall meetings or other meetings that the councillors are having with their community to present this information, and as opposed to sort of leverage the consultation that you're having with the city's opportunities to get this out to as many people as possible. It'll be a more truncated type presentation unless you want us to have a larger presentation with your community, but staff are always available to attend any town hall meetings, whether it's one item on the agenda or the agenda item, to talk about the work we're doing around the MTSA work, the inclusionary zoning work, as well as the follow-up zoning bylaw updates that will follow from this, as well as some of the work that the zoning team is doing in terms of completing the accessory dwelling units and rolling that out into the fall and into early next year, and look so that people can really see how the different pieces all fit together, especially around the housing file. There's a lot of different moving bits and pieces across, there's planning, healthy communities, and other groups are involved in it, and we want to make sure that the people can see how all of these pieces are fitting together as part of the city's housing strategy and commitment to meeting sort of those housing targets that the province is asked the municipality to achieve. Thank you very much.
Chair, I'll also attest that staff absolutely were awesome. I mean, we had our Office of LRT at my town hall yesterday, so it was pretty amazing to see. So I wholeheartedly agree that staff have been really great with showing up to at least my town halls. My last question then is, how are we leveraging the trends around aging and seniors and accessibility? Because that came up in my town hall yesterday, and it's very pertinent to, I think, how we are planning for MTSAs in the future. But I suppose that's the one piece that I'm just trying to understand, like, how does that play in, and is that not within the planning? I'm just not sure.
Through the chair. So when we go out and engage, we do expect we will not just be hearing about the MTSA models, but sort of additional questions related to housing and the housing needs. And as Chief Planner Robichaud mentioned, we would be taking in all of that feedback and making sure that we have staff attend those meetings that can answer those, because we understand it's all a bit policy wonky, and MTSA, but make sure that it's a community meeting to get that feedback. So the feedback is received from the city and provided and incorporated into those areas of the city that are trying to address those challenges.
Thank you. My last comment was that I heard loud and clear that in my ward, especially in the Queenston and Parkdale area, the demographic is aging significantly, and many came out to my town hall yesterday really worried about not being able to access the LRT, especially because it is the stations are very far apart. So that's a comment that I'd just like to leave right as a closing bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tattison.
Just a couple of very basic questions. My first one is around the statement, the identify needs for alternative targets. Are we looking at, when we say alternative targets, are we looking at lowering the density number to meet that location's requirements, or are we talking about changing locations?
Through the chair, we're looking at lowering the target for that specific station area from what is in the growth plan.
And that is because like certain areas like Parkdale would have a park right there and so forth. So in keeping with that questioning, if we intensify, does that mean that there's potential to lose green space?
Through the chair. So through the MTSA work, we are looking at the existing policy framework that is in place, and we, Dillon Consulting, will be providing recommendations on whether the city may have to look at further intensifying any of the major transit station areas, but I would note that the province does provide the flexibility for alternative targets, and in looking at other municipalities where they've requested the lower targets, the site conditions are similar to some of the areas that we don't meet, where there is a large amount of green space, a large piece of public infrastructure like the 403, or like a well-established neighborhood that provide the rationale on why that station area density should be lowered.
Thanks, Planner Thoman. I guess just one last thing to throw out there. The word I saw, opportunity for intensification. When I hear that, I'm thinking of existing residents. What happens to people who live in an area that's designated for intensification?
Through the chair. So the intensification areas in the draft MTSA report are much more narrow than the overall station area. So they are just focused on primarily existing commercial corridors that already have land use permissions to intensify, like beyond. So if it's a single detached dwelling on Main Street, that property owner would already know that they're within a, like a transit intensification corridor. So we would expect that those property owners and the residents that live within those areas would already have some understanding of where the city is looking to intensify, but the consultation that we're planning just provides an additional opportunity for them to come out, look at what the city already has in terms of policy, and then ask questions to make sure that they're informed as well as engaged.
If I may add, through the chair to the councillor, sorry, Charlie, interrupt. Staff are cognizant of that very question you asked about the social impacts of change or of gentrification within neighborhoods. So in addition to the work that MLE has been involved in around the renoviction file and how to protect tenants on that and some of the changes coming out of the province, we planning staff, we're just working with our colleagues in legal, and we hope to bring forward, I believe in October, a report for additional public, a bylaw and a report dealing with protecting rental housing from demolition. Now that would only apply to 6 units or more. My recollection is City of Toronto, City of Mississauga, and recently the City of Oakville, or the Town of Oakville, have adopted bylaws to protect rental housing and require the replacement of rental housing on a citywide basis. So that is something that we have been working on, and the policy group have been working on that for the last year. And we hope to bring that report forward, I believe in October or possibly November, for council consideration and or adoption. That would protect, we're really looking at protecting our existing stock of rental housing or managing the change where rental housing is being impacted. And based on the provincial legislation under the Municipal Act, we do have some tools available to us, and we will be recommending looking at this a permitting regime to protect and require the replacement of rental housing. My recollection is it only applies to buildings containing 6 units or more. So there is that concern where you have 2 or 3 units above a storefront along Main Street, but also working with our MLE colleagues in some of the work they've been doing around the renoviction file is in terms of dealing with that. So that is part of the city's strategy in terms of protecting the housing stock and ensuring where an existing rental building is demolished, that we manage that change. There may be disruption to the tenants, but at least we can have that replacement rental housing provided based on the experience that we've been seeing in Toronto, Mississauga, and Oakville in terms of protecting rental housing from demolition when it comes forward for redevelopment at a higher density than what currently exists. So that's the thought process right now, and bringing that forward once legal staff are satisfied with their review of the bylaw, and then we're satisfied with the report and the recommendations. But I'd like to get it to committee as quickly as possible because it is an important issue within the city of Hamilton. Sorry, Charlie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair. Thanks, Chief Planner. That's what I was getting at when I saw the words opportunity for intensification. I was kind of thinking of gentrification, expropriation, words like that. Just one last clarification. It said 14 out of 19 were met, but in the draft it said 15 out of 20. So is there a discrepancy between those two numbers, or am I missing something?
Through the chair, I'll let Patty or Annie respond to that, just so I don't mix it up myself.
Through the chair, I can answer this question. There are in total 20 station areas, so 17 LRT stations and 3 GO train stations with 19 MTSAs, as the James and Downtown GO share an MTSA.
Through the chair, thanks for that clarification.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further speakers on this, so thank you for the in-depth presentation. I need a mover and a seconder to receive the presentations. Moved by Councillor McMeekin, seconded by Councillor Cassar. All in favor or opposed? That is unanimous, thank you. And then on the report recommendations to approve, moved by Councillor Beattie, seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson. Is there any discussion on the report? Councillor Kretsch?
Thanks. Just very briefly, there are about 6 of these MTSAs that are in Ward 2 or adjacent to Ward 2. And also at the same time, a number of other planning instruments that are going on here. Got the setting sail plans in the north end, the downtown secondary plan. And I read the report closely. I didn't really see an explanation of how, as these MTSAs and other planning instruments are developed, that they'll interact with these other plans that exist. So I'm looking for just a bit better of an understanding there, because I know right now when neighbors or ourselves are interacting with developments that are happening, we're looking at all these different kinds of things, right? And I'm trying to see how seamlessly these things are going to interact with one another, or if this is going to create another layer for people downtown to have to kind of negotiate through and understanding what's happening with development in the area. So if that makes sense.
Through the chair, the MTSA planning exercise is looking at those existing official plan policies and what they would allow. We do understand that, especially in the downtown, there are a lot of other policy initiatives on the going, and our proposed consultation to the public would try to draw the lines to clearly show what feeds into what, but the purpose of the MTSA work isn't to create, it is, at this time, it's not intended to create new intensification policies that would duplicate additional work. It would just clearly map out what those MTSA boundaries are, as well as any protected major transit station areas.
Thank you. I'll just ask a slightly more precise question. Will we be using this to amend current secondary plans, or these end up being standalone documents that people refer to? That's kind of what I'm trying to understand here, is how the instruments are going to work together.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the councillor, where there's an in-force and effect secondary plan that overlaps with the MTSA, the intent will be to update the secondary plan so that there will only be one sort of policy document dealing with development for that MTSA. Where the MTSA is outside of a secondary plan, then we will need to have policies around those situations. But as you indicated, so, you know, the Centennial Neighborhood Secondary Plan, Setting Sail, the Downtown Secondary Plan, the Ainsleywood Westdale Secondary Plans, and the Strathcona Secondary Plans, they all contain MTSAs, and it's from a user's perspective, and so that the citizens and the community have clarity, we will update those secondary plans to provide for clear direction around the MTSAs. There will be a need to have a general map or appendix that identifies the MTSAs, but there'll be policy reference saying that where there's a secondary plan in effect, please see the secondary plan in terms of what is permitted at what height and density within that MTSA. Thank you. And, sorry, and we'll also be updating the zoning accordingly so that people aren't confused going back and forth in terms of dealing with, so that's the other intent. That is a provincial direction as well, is they essentially want the MTSAs to be shovel ready. So consistent with our approach along the LRT corridor, we will have to come back and revisit the zoning to ensure that it's in aligning with that MTSA designation in the secondary plan or in the parent official plan document. Thank you.
Thanks. Answers my question. Really appreciate the answer and the clarity about how we're going to do this.
Thank you, Councillor. Not seeing any further discussion, so I believe we had a mover and a seconder. All in favor of the report recommendations, which is to receive and then to do further consultation? All in favor or opposed? And as people continue to bring up LRT, we are moving forward with this project. It is underway, as is evidenced by today, changing zoning, planning ahead. The work is happening right now. Councillor Kretsch, you able to vote? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 11.3, Administrative Penalty System Database. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the recommendations in the report. Moved by Councillor Cassar, seconded by Councillor Francis. Is there any discussion on the report of the recommendations? Seeing none. All in favor or opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you. There are no motions. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none. General Manager's update. Update?
Through the chair, just a quick update, and I sent this out to council yesterday, that as I, at the beginning of the month, transition into the acting city manager role, Mr. Robichaud drew the short straw, and will be transitioning into the acting general manager role starting at the beginning of October. So you won't be seeing me at planning committee. I'll be attending the fun ones like governance and AF&A and all of that good stuff. But you'll be in very good hands with Mr. Robichaud. So thanks to him for taking on the job.
Thank you and congratulations, Chief Planner Robichaud, or condolences, I'm not sure. Thank you. So I need a mover and a seconder to receive the general manager's update. Moved by Councillor Cassar, seconded by Councillor Nan. All in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. I believe the next item is just the closed session minutes. I don't think that we need to go into camera for this, okay? So in that case, thank you. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes as presented and that they remain confidential. Moved by Councillor Tattison, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. All in favor or opposed? Well, you're good today, Lisa. Pardon me? You're close. I know. That carries. Thank you. And I believe adjournment. Mover and a seconder to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Tattison, seconded by Councillor Wang. All in favor or oppose? It's 11:57 a.m. Off by 9 minutes.
I said 11:48.
Thank you, everyone. That's unanimous. We're adjourned.